The millionaire purposely dirtied the floor and humiliated the cleaner. "You are as filthy as the dirt you clean." But minutes later, he had to kneel at her feet. Avery Seraphine Carter scrubbed the hospital floor with mechanical precision, her mind miles away from the antiseptic-scented hallway where she knelt. The rhythmic motion of pushing the mop back and forth had become second nature after years of cleaning other people's messes. First at the downtown office complex from 5 a.m. to noon, then at the community college until 5 p.m., and now here at Grand Harbor Municipal Hospital until late evening. "Mrs. Carter." Avery looked up, her hands instantly stilling. Dr. Rivers stood a few feet away, clutching a manila folder that Avery immediately recognized. It contained her daughter's test results. The doctor's expression told her everything she needed to know before a single word was spoken. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" Dr. Rivers asked, her voice gentle but clinical, in a small consultation room that smelled of coffee and hand sanitizer. Avery perched on the edge of a chair as Dr. Rivers explained what the latest echocardiogram had revealed. "Daisy's ventricular septal defect has increased in size," the doctor said, pointing to shadowy images that meant nothing to Avery's untrained eyes, but everything to her mother's heart. "The pressure in her pulmonary arteries is concerning. We've managed with medication for years, but I'm afraid we've reached the point where surgical intervention is no longer optional. It's necessary." "How soon?" Avery asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Within the next 2 months, 3 at the absolute maximum." Avery's mind immediately began calculating numbers. Her savings, her credit card limits, the small insurance policy that covered only a fraction of what Daisy needed. The surgery would cost more than she could earn in 5 years. "I understand," she said simply, because what else could she say? Later that night, in the cramped one-bedroom apartment they called home, Avery watched her daughter sleep. At 7, Daisy was small for her age, her complexion too pale, her breathing sometimes labored. But when she smiled, God, when she smiled, it was like looking at Jeremiah all over again. Those unmistakable green eyes, the dimple on her right cheek, the way her nose crinkled when she laughed. Avery's hand instinctively went to the gold medallion hidden beneath her sweater, the Redwood family crest, the last tangible connection to a life that sometimes felt like nothing more than a dream. 10 years ago, she had been Avery Redwood, medical student and wife to Jeremiah, heir to one of the country's largest fortunes. Now she was just Avery Carter, a nobody with calloused hands and 3 minimum-wage jobs. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Clean and Shine Staffing Agency. "Urgent opening tomorrow. Luxury residence. Double pay for short notice. Interested?" Avery texted back immediately. Yes. She didn't ask for details. She couldn't afford to be picky. Double pay meant double pay, and Daisy's medical bills wouldn't wait. On the other side of Grand Harbor, Maxwell Redwood Hathaway stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, staring out at the manicured gardens of the Redwood estate without really seeing them. At 65, he remained an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and the same piercing green eyes that had intimidated business rivals for decades. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand and a medical report in the other. The words "further testing required" and "concerning abnormalities" stood out in stark relief against the white paper. Maxwell had survived hostile takeovers, market crashes, and business betrayals, but his body was now staging its own revolt, one he couldn't control with money or influence. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded, not turning from the window. "The board meeting has been rescheduled for tomorrow morning," his assistant informed him. "And Mr. Leon Redwood has requested to join." Maxwell's jaw tightened at the mention of his half-brother. "Fine, that'll be all." After the door closed, Maxwell drained his scotch in one swallow. Leon, always hovering like a vulture, as if he could smell Maxwell's weakness. 8 years ago, when Jeremiah had disappeared, Leon had been the one to bring Maxwell the evidence of his son's betrayal. Photographs, bank transfers, a hasty note in Jeremiah's handwriting. His only son, his heir, running off with some European model, abandoning everything, including his new wife, that gold-digging medical student Maxwell had warned him against. The sharp pain in his chest returned, and Maxwell couldn't tell if it was grief or whatever condition the doctors were trying to diagnose. Both were eating him alive. His phone rang. Brandon Cole, the ex-cop turned private investigator he'd hired years ago to find Jeremiah. "Still nothing?" Maxwell asked without preamble. "Still nothing," Brandon confirmed. "But I'm following a new lead in Rustwood Highlands. Might be nothing, but..." "Follow it," Maxwell interrupted. "Whatever it costs." After hanging up, Maxwell pulled open his desk drawer and removed a small velvet box. Inside lay an identical copy of the medallion he'd given Jeremiah on his 20th birthday, the Redwood family crest in solid gold, a tradition passed down for generations. Jeremiah had been wearing his. The day he disappeared, Maxwell snapped the box shut. 8 years of searching, of hoping, of hating, and still nothing but ghosts. From his own wing of the Redwood mansion, Leon Redwood watched the digital feed from the hidden camera in Maxwell's study. At 58, Leon was leaner than his half-brother. His hair dyed an unnatural black, his face subtly lifted by the best plastic surgeon's money could buy. He smiled as he watched Maxwell put away the medallion, noted the medical report on the desk, observed the slight tremor in his brother's hand as he poured another scotch. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The monthly doctor's report indicated the medication swap was working. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to gradually weaken the great Maxwell Redwood. Leon's phone chimed with a message from the psychiatric facility in Rustwood Highlands. "Patient J stable. Memory treatments continuing as scheduled. Excellent. 8 years of keeping Jeremiah drugged into compliance. 8 years of gradually taking control of various Redwood subsidiaries. 8 years of patient waiting. Soon the empire would be his. The empire that should have been his from the start." As the firstborn son, his phone rang again. The display showed Clean and Shine Staffing Agency. "Mr. Redwood, we've confirmed a replacement cleaner for tomorrow as requested. References checked. Background clear." "Good," Leon replied. "Make sure she understands the confidentiality requirements," as he ended the call. Leon smiled again. Maxwell's paranoia about staff was useful. It allowed Leon to control who entered the mansion, ensuring none stayed long enough to notice patterns or overhear too much. This new cleaner would be just another faceless servant, coming and going without impact, while Leon continued to tighten his grip on the Redwood legacy. Little did he know that destiny had just dealt a wild card into his carefully arranged deck. The Redwood mansion loomed before Avery like something from another world. 3 weeks had passed since she'd started working there, yet the sheer opulence of the estate still took her breath away. Massive stone pillars, immaculate gardens, and windows that gleamed like diamonds in the morning sun. It was the kind of place that made her feel like an intruder, merely by existing within its boundaries. She clutched her cleaning cart tighter as she passed through the service entrance, nodding to the security guard who barely acknowledged her. After 3 weeks, she was just another invisible person who kept the mansion functioning. "West Wing needs extra attention today," Mrs. Hoffman, the head housekeeper, informed her curtly. "Mr. Redwood is hosting business associates in the main study at 11. Everything must be spotless." Avery nodded, her heart skipping a beat at the mention of Mr. Redwood. In 3 weeks, she'd managed to avoid direct contact with Maxwell, cleaning rooms when they were empty, slipping away whenever footsteps approached. The mansion was large enough that avoiding one man wasn't difficult, especially when that man rarely noticed service staff. As she pushed her cart toward the West Wing, Avery's hand instinctively went to her chest, feeling the outline of the medallion beneath her uniform. She always wore it, hidden from sight, along with a folded page from Jeremiah's diary, tucked into a small pocket she'd sewn inside her bra. These items were her talismans, reminders of what once was and what she fought for now. The grand study was her last stop. Avery worked methodically, dusting bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, polishing the mahogany desk that dominated the room, vacuuming the Persian rug that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. As she cleaned, she couldn't help but notice the photographs on the walls. Corporate achievements, handshakes with politicians, ribbon cuttings. Not a single family photo, not one image of Jeremiah. A sound at the door made her spin around, nearly knocking over a crystal paperweight. Maxwell Redwood stood in the doorway, regarding her with those piercing green eyes, the same eyes Daisy had inherited from her father. He looked older than she remembered, his face more lined, but no less intimidating. "You're new," he stated flatly. "Yes, sir," Avery replied, lowering her gaze as she'd learned to do with employers who preferred their staff invisible. "I've been here 3 weeks. I'm just finishing up." Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. Maxwell grunted non-committally and moved to his desk, shuffling through papers without acknowledging her further. Avery quickly gathered her cleaning supplies, desperate to escape before any chance recognition could occur. With her changed appearance, the short hair, the glasses, the premature aging from stress, she doubted he would connect her to the medical student who had briefly been his daughter-in-law. Still, being in his presence made her skin crawl with anxiety. Just as she reached the door, Maxwell's voice stopped her. "The bookshelf in the corner still has dust on the top shelf." Avery hesitated, then turned back. "I'll take care of it right away, sir." As she stretched to reach the top shelf, she silently cursed her 5'4" frame. The shelf was just beyond her reach, even on tiptoes. "Use the stepladder," Maxwell instructed impatiently. Not looking up from his papers, Avery retrieved the small stepladder from her cart and carefully climbed it, aware of Maxwell's intermittent glances in her direction. She worked quickly, desperate to finish and leave. A commotion outside the study drew Maxwell's attention. Leon Redwood swept in, followed by 3 men in expensive suits. "Maxwell, we're early, I know, but the Tokyo investors were eager to get started," Leon announced, his voice dripping with false cordiality. Maxwell rose to greet them, his demeanor instantly shifting to that of the confident business titan. "Gentlemen, welcome to Redwood Enterprises." Avery kept her head down, hoping to become invisible as she descended the stepladder. "The fourth quarter projections exceed expectations," Leon continued, spreading documents across Maxwell's desk. "But the Chinese market is showing concerning volatility that—" "I've reviewed the numbers," Maxwell interrupted sharply. "The volatility is manageable if we proceed with the strategy I outlined last week." One of the investors, a stern-looking Japanese man, raised an eyebrow. "Your strategy involves significant risk, Mr. Redwood. Perhaps we should consider alternatives." "There are no alternatives," Maxwell responded, his tone growing colder. Redwood Enterprises didn't become an empire by playing it safe. As the tension in the room intensified, Avery attempted to slip out unnoticed. Her elbow knocked against a decorative vase, causing it to wobble. She caught it before it fell, drawing unwanted attention. Maxwell's eyes darted to her, irritation flashing across his features. The business discussion halted awkwardly. "Perhaps the cleaning staff should return later," Leon suggested smoothly, something in his tone, a hint of disdain that went beyond normal dismissiveness toward service workers, made Maxwell's expression darken. Avery had seen that look before, years ago, when someone had challenged his authority. What happened next shocked her to her core. "No," Maxwell said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Let her stay." He walked deliberately to a silver coffee service on a side table, picked up the full pot, and turned to Avery with cold fury in his eyes. "You," he said, "seem to enjoy being noticed." Without warning, he poured the coffee directly onto the pristine carpet. "Clean it," he commanded. Stunned, Avery stared at the spreading brown stain on the expensive rug. "I said clean it," Maxwell repeated, his voice harder. The Japanese investors shifted uncomfortably. Leon watched with a small smile playing at his lips. Maxwell wasn't finished. He walked to a potted plant, tipped it over, spilling soil across the marble floor, then knocked a waste bin sideways, scattering crumpled papers. "Clean all of it," he ordered. "Now!" Avery felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she knelt on the floor, aware of the business executives watching her. With trembling hands, she began blotting the coffee stain, fighting back tears. "This is how it works, gentlemen," Maxwell announced, returning to his desk. "When I give an order, it's followed. Whether it's a corporate strategy or cleaning a mess, my word is final." As Avery worked, Maxwell's voice cut through her like a knife. "You are as filthy as the dirt you clean. People like you were born to serve people like us." Something inside Avery snapped. She looked up, momentarily forgetting her disguise, and met Maxwell's gaze directly. For a fleeting second, confusion crossed his face. A hint of recognition quickly dismissed. She returned to her task, hands shaking with suppressed rage and humiliation. As she leaned forward to gather the scattered waste paper, The chain around her neck caught on a decorative nailhead in the desk. When she pulled away, it broke, sending the medallion tumbling out from beneath her uniform. The gold redwood family crest landed on the marble floor with an accusatory clink, spinning briefly before coming to rest directly at Maxwell's feet. Alongside it fluttered a yellowed page covered in handwriting, a page from Jeremiah's diary. The room fell completely silent. Maxwell stared at the medallion, his face draining of color. He knelt slowly, picking up the gold piece with a shaking hand. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Avery, frozen in place, couldn't speak. The medallion, Jeremiah's medallion, now lay in the palm of his father's hand, a betrayal of her carefully maintained disguise. Maxwell's eyes moved from the medallion to the diary page. He reached for it, scanning the handwritten text, recognition dawning in his eyes. "This is Jeremiah's writing," he said, looking up at Avery with dawning comprehension. "This is dated a week after he supposedly left." Their eyes locked, green meeting brown, as 8 years of deception began to crumble. "Everyone out," Maxwell commanded, not breaking eye contact with Avery. "Except you," as Leon and the investors reluctantly departed, casting curious glances behind them. Avery knew her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The door clicked shut behind Leon and the investors, leaving Avery and Maxwell in a silence so complete she could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Maxwell stared at her, the medallion clutched in one hand, Jeremiah's diary page in the other. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Avery stood, her legs unsteady. "I think you know who I am." Maxwell's eyes narrowed as he studied her face, peering beyond the short hair, the plain glasses. The years of hardship etched into her features. Recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. "Avery Seraphine," he whispered. "The medical student." "Carter now," she corrected. "I took my mother's maiden name." Maxwell circled her like a predator, disbelief and suspicion warring on his face. "You were married to my son for what, 2 months? Then he disappeared. And so did you." His fingers tightened around the medallion. "How did you get this?" "He was wearing it when he left. When he disappeared," Avery corrected again, finding strength in the truth she'd carried for years. "Jeremiah didn't leave Mr. Redwood, he was taken." Maxwell's face hardened. "We found evidence." "You found what someone wanted you to find," Avery interrupted. "The night Jeremiah vanished, we were planning to tell you about our marriage, about the baby." The word hung in the air between them. Maxwell froze. "Baby," he repeated, his voice barely audible. "Your granddaughter," Avery said. "Daisy. She's 7 years old and fighting for her life in Grand Harbor Municipal Hospital with a congenital heart defect that requires surgery I can't afford." Maxwell sank into his chair, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. He looked again at the diary page in his hand. "This is dated September 28th, he said slowly. "A week after he supposedly fled to Europe. He gave me that medallion the night he disappeared," Avery explained. "He'd been investigating something within Redwood Enterprises. He kept a diary of what he discovered." Maxwell's head snapped up. "What diary? Where is it?" "Somewhere safe," Avery said, unwilling to reveal all her cards. "This is just one page I keep with me." Maxwell ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Leon told me Jeremiah ran off with some model. Said he'd been planning it for months. Had evidence. Photos, bank transfers. All lies," Avery said firmly. "Jeremiah loved you. He would never have abandoned you or me." A tense silence stretched between them. Maxwell studied the medallion, rubbing his thumb over the intricate redwood crest, an eagle clutching an oak branch. "You've been working in my house for 3 weeks, he finally said. "Why?" "Revenge. Survival," Avery replied. "Daisy needs surgery within 2 months. It costs more than I'll make in years. I took this job because it paid double for short notice. You didn't know this was my house. Not until I arrived. By then, I needed the money too badly to walk away." Maxwell's expression remained guarded, decades of business negotiations making him naturally suspicious. "Why should I believe any of this?" Avery reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With trembling fingers, she opened her photo gallery and turned the screen toward Maxwell. "This is why," On the screen was Daisy, sitting in her hospital bed, a book open on her lap. Despite the paleness of her complexion and the medical equipment surrounding her, there was no mistaking those brilliant green eyes, the shape of her face, the dimple in her right cheek when she smiled. It was like looking at Jeremiah as a child. Maxwell stared at the photo, transfixed. He reached for the phone, zooming in on Daisy's face, searching for any hint of deception and finding none. "I need to see her," he said abruptly, standing. "No," Avery replied, surprising herself with her firmness. "Not yet. I won't have you walking into her life and then walking out again when you decide we're inconvenient. She's my granddaughter. She's my daughter," Avery countered. "A daughter who's never known her father, who spent her entire life in and out of hospitals, who's tough as nails but shouldn't have to be. I won't let you hurt her." Maxwell sat back down, something like respect flickering across his features. "Then tell me everything from the beginning." 2 hours later, Maxwell sat alone in his office, the medallion on his desk beside the diary page. Avery had gone, sent home with a promise that her job was secure, and a sealed envelope containing $50,000 in cash for Daisy's immediate medical needs. It wasn't charity, Maxwell had insisted when she'd initially refused. It was a grandfather's obligation, a down payment on 8 years of absence. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Brandon Cole," answered a deep voice. "It's Maxwell Redwood." "Mr. Redwood," Brandon replied, instantly alert. "Any news on your end?" "Actually, yes." Maxwell paused, still processing everything Avery had told him. "I need you back in Grand Harbor immediately. The search parameters have changed." "How so?" "Jeremiah didn't run away. He was taken, and I think my brother Leon is behind it." A brief silence then. "That's a serious accusation, sir." "I'm aware. I need you to investigate Leon discreetly. Bank records, phone calls, properties I might not know about. Focus on anything connected to Rustwood Highlands." "Understood. I'll be in Grand Harbor by morning." "One more thing," Maxwell added. "I need information on Grand Harbor Municipal Hospital, specifically pediatric cardiology." The following afternoon, Maxwell Redwood, wearing a nondescript gray suit rather than his usual tailored attire, walked through the pediatric ward of Grand Harbor Municipal Hospital. He carried a small gift bag and had informed the staff he was visiting as a donor interested in the pediatric cardiac program. His real purpose was currently sitting in bed 307. Drawing in a sketchbook, Maxwell paused in the doorway, his heart constricting at the sight of Daisy. In person, the resemblance to Jeremiah was even more striking. Same determined set of the jaw, same way of tilting her head slightly as she concentrated. "Hello?" he said softly. Daisy looked up, those redwood green eyes widening slightly. "Hello," she replied, her voice stronger than he'd expected for someone so ill. "I'm Mr. Maxwell," he said, using only his first name. "I'm a visitor checking on the hospital's heart program. Would you mind if I come in?" Daisy shrugged. "You can come in. You can come. Visiting hours aren't over, and my mom's still at work." Maxwell entered, placing the gift bag on the side table. "I brought you something. I hear you like to draw." Daisy eyed the bag with cautious interest. "Thank you, but my mom says I'm not supposed to accept gifts from strangers." "Your mother sounds very wise," Maxwell replied, his respect for Avery growing. "Perhaps we should wait until she's here." Daisy nodded, studying him with frank curiosity. "Are you rich? You look rich." A startled laugh escaped Maxwell. "What makes you say that?" "Your watch," Daisy pointed. "My mom says you can tell a lot about people from their shoes and watches. Yours are both really nice." "Your mother is right again," Maxwell said, sitting in the visitor's chair. "May I ask what you're drawing?" Daisy hesitated, then turned her sketchbook. "It's a castle, but not a princess castle, a scientist castle where they invent heart machines." Maxwell leaned forward, genuinely impressed by the detailed drawing. "That's remarkable. You're very talented. I want to be a doctor someday," Daisy said matter-of-factly, "to fix hearts like mine." Something in Maxwell's own heart shifted, a piece falling into place that he hadn't known was missing, as they talked. About Daisy's drawings, about the books she read, about her dream of becoming a doctor. Maxwell found himself captivated by this small, determined child who carried his blood, He had come to confirm what Avery had told him, but he was finding so much more. A glimpse of what family truly meant, beyond bloodlines and inheritance. What he didn't see was Leon watching from the hallway, phone in hand, a calculating expression on his face. Brandon Cole had learned patience during his 15 years on the police force. It was a skill that had served him well as a detective, and now as a private investigator, sitting in his rental car outside Leon Redwood's downtown office building. He reminded himself of this as he waited for the right moment. 6 hours of surveillance had yielded little, but Brandon wasn't discouraged. The best investigations were slow burns, not fireworks displays. He sipped lukewarm coffee and checked his watch. Leon's secretary had left 20 minutes ago. The cleaning crew was inside now. According to the schedule Brandon had obtained from a security guard he'd befriended and generously tipped, Leon himself should exit within the hour. His phone vibrated. A text from his contact at Grand Harbor Financial, records attached, unusual activity flagged. Brandon downloaded the file and scanned it quickly. For 8 years, he'd been searching for Jeremiah Redwood, following cold leads and false trails. Now, with Maxwell's new information, previously meaningless data points were aligning into a disturbing pattern. Leon Redwood had been making monthly payments of $50,000 to something called Highlands Wellness Institute for the past 8 years. The payments came from a shell company 3 layers removed from Leon's official holdings. Not impossible to trace, but difficult enough that no one looking at standard financial records would notice. Brandon pulled up the website for Highlands Wellness Institute. Its bland corporate design revealed little. Providing specialized therapeutic services for high-profile clients since 1998. No staff photos, no specific treatment descriptions, just vague promises of privacy and discretion for those who could afford it. The address, however, confirmed Maxwell's suspicions. Rustwood Highlands. Movement at the building's entrance caught his attention. Leon emerged, talking animatedly on his phone. Instead of heading to his usual chauffeur-driven car, he walked briskly down the street to a nearby parking garage. Brandon started his car, preparing to follow, when his own phone rang. Maxwell Redwood. "I've found something," Brandon said without preamble. "Monthly payments from Leon to a facility in Rustwood Highlands. I'm following him now." "Be careful," Maxwell warned. "Leon's at the hospital. I just saw him watching Daisy from the hallway." Brandon frowned. "That's impossible. He's right in front of me, getting into a silver Audi." A beat of silence. "He has a body double," Maxwell realized. "Of course he does. I'll stay on this Leon," Brandon decided. "You keep an eye on Daisy." "Already done. I've arranged private security. Discreet, posing as additional hospital staff. No one will get near her without proper clearance." Brandon pulled into traffic, maintaining a safe distance behind Leon's Audi. "What's our next move regarding the facility?" "Get me proof," Maxwell said, his voice hardening. "Concrete evidence that Jeremiah is there, then we move." Nurse Harriet Winters had worked in pediatric cardiology for 35 years. She'd seen it all. Miracle recoveries, devastating losses, children braver than most adults. After 3 decades, very little surprised her. But the green eyes of the little girl in bed 307 had stopped her in her tracks. Harriet had been new to Grand Harbor when she'd first encountered those same distinctive eyes, a shade between emerald and jade that she'd never seen before or since. Except now, in this child, she'd been a private nurse then, caring for a young boy named Jeremiah Redwood after his tonsillectomy. Those eyes, the bone structure. This child was unmistakably related to the Redwood family. Now, checking Daisy's vitals during evening rounds, Harriet chatted with the girl while contemplating this puzzle. "Did you enjoy your visitor today?" she asked casually. "Mr. Maxwell," Daisy replied. "He was nice. He knows lots about science and hearts. He's coming back tomorrow with a book about medical inventions." Harriet's hands stilled momentarily on the blood pressure cuff. Maxwell Redwood himself had visited. Things were getting curiouser. "That sounds lovely," she said, noting Daisy's slightly elevated heart rate on the chart. "Remember to rest, though. No getting too excited over books." "Nurse Harriet, will my mom be here soon?" "Any minute now, honey." She called to say she's on her way, as if summoned by the words. Avery appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but managing a smile for her daughter. Harriet finished her checks and stepped into the hallway to give them privacy. but not before taking a final careful look at mother and child. There was a story here, and after 35 years in healthcare, Harriet had developed a sixth sense for when something wasn't right. The distinguished visitor, the child with redwood eyes, the mother working herself to the bone, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. As she made notes at the nurse's station, Harriet noticed Dr. Finley in deep conversation with a well-dressed man near the elevator. She recognized him immediately. Leon Redwood. She'd seen him occasionally during her time as Jeremiah's nurse. Their conversation appeared intense, with Dr. Finley nodding repeatedly as Leon spoke in low tones. Money changed hands. A thick envelope slipped discreetly from Leon's jacket to the doctor's lab coat pocket. Harriet busied herself with paperwork, pretending not to notice, but her mind was racing. Dr. Finley was scheduled to perform Daisy's surgery, and Leon Redwood had just paid him off. She waited until Leon had left before approaching Dr. Finley. "Heavy patient load today?" she asked innocently. Finley started, clearly nervous. "What? Oh, yes. Very busy. That was Leon Redwood I saw you speaking with, wasn't it? Such an influential family." The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you need something, Nurse Winters?" "Just confirming the pre-op schedule for Daisy Carter," Harriet replied smoothly. "You're still performing her surgery next month." "Of course," he said too quickly. "Everything's proceeding as planned." As he walked away, Harriet made a decision. She'd kept the Redwoods' secrets once before. Out of professional duty, she wouldn't do it again. Not when a child's life hung in the balance. Leon Redwood paced his private office at Redwood Tower, agitation evident in every movement. The face on his video call, Dr. Marcus Shields, director of Highlands Wellness Institute, looked equally troubled. "Patient J had another episode yesterday," Dr. Shields reported. "He became lucid enough to ask about a woman named Avery." Leon cursed under his breath. "Increase his medication. With respect, Mr. Redwood, we're already at dangerous levels. Any higher dosage risks permanent damage or even—" "Did I ask for your medical opinion?" Leon snapped. "Increase it, temporarily. I need him compliant for the next few months." Dr. Shields sighed. "As you wish, but I must register my professional objection." "Noted," Leon replied dismissively. "Has anyone unusual been asking about the facility? Any unscheduled visitors?" "None. Security remains tight." After ending the call, Leon turned to the bank of monitors on his wall, security feeds from various locations. One showed Maxwell in his study, speaking with Brandon Cole. Another displayed Avery entering her apartment building, looking exhausted. The third showed Daisy in her hospital room, drawing in her sketchbook. Leon studied the child's face, noting the unmistakable Redwood features. He hadn't known about the girl until today, but her existence complicated things significantly. Maxwell had found his missing heir's child, a direct bloodline that could threaten everything Leon had worked toward. His phone rang, a secure line connected to his operative at the hospital. "Dr. Finley is compromised," the voice reported without preamble. "Nurse Harriet Winters saw the payment and is asking questions. She has a history with the family. Was Jeremiah's nurse 20 years ago?" "Handle it," Leon ordered, but discreetly. No loose ends. As he hung up, Leon pulled up another security feed, this one showing Brandon Cole following his body double to Rustwood Highlands. Everything was unraveling faster than anticipated. He needed to accelerate his timeline. He opened a secure messaging app and typed, "Begin Phase 2. Effective immediately." Avery sat beside Daisy's hospital bed, reading aloud from her daughter's favorite book while the child drifted toward sleep. The $50,000 from Maxwell had already been put to work. New specialists consulted, better medications secured. Daisy's name moved up the surgery schedule. Money made everything easier. A bitter truth Avery had learned the hard way. "Mom," Daisy murmured sleepily. "I like Mr. Maxwell. He has eyes like mine." Avery's throat tightened. "Does he, sweetheart?" "Mm-hmm. Is he going to be my friend now?" "We'll see," Avery whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "Sleep now." As Daisy's breathing deepened, Avery noticed a nurse she didn't recognize hovering in the doorway. Older, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. "Mrs. Carter?" "I'm Nurse Harriet Winters. May I speak with you privately? It's about Daisy's safety." In a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, Nurse Harriet's words fell like bombs in Avery's world. "Dr. Finley has been compromised. she explained in hushed tones. "I saw Leon Redwood pass him an envelope. Money. And afterward, when I questioned him about Daisy's surgery, he was nervous, evasive." Avery's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your daughter is in danger if Dr. Finley operates on her," Harriet replied bluntly. "And I think it has something to do with her being a Redwood." Avery stared, speechless. "Those green eyes are unmistakable," Harriet continued. "I was Jeremiah's nurse when he was a boy, changed his bandages after a tonsillectomy when he was 10. Those eyes, there's no mistaking them, and now Maxwell himself is visiting." "How do you know about Maxwell?" Avery asked sharply. Daisy mentioned her new friend, Mr. Maxwell. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Harriet leaned forward. "Mrs. Carter, I don't know what's happening within that family, but I won't stand by while a child is put at risk. We need to get Daisy transferred to another surgeon immediately." Avery slumped in her chair. "We can't, Doctor. Finley is the only cardiac surgeon at Grand Harbor who takes our insurance. We're barely managing as it is." "Then we need help," Harriet said firmly. "Powerful help." Maxwell's private study had become a war room. Brandon Cole stood before a whiteboard covered with names, dates, and connecting lines. Avery sat rigidly in a leather chair, while Nurse Harriet perched beside her. Maxwell himself paced the length of the room, absorbing the implications of what they'd pieced together. "Leon's been making payments to Highlands Wellness Institute for exactly 8 years, Brandon explained, pointing to financial records. "The payments began 1 week after Jeremiah disappeared. And this facility specializes in what exactly?" Maxwell demanded. "Officially, mental health treatment for high-profile clients. Unofficially," Brandon shrugged, "it's isolated, heavily secured, and nearly impossible to access without prior clearance. Perfect place to keep someone against their will," Harriet observed. Maxwell stopped pacing. "And now Leon is bribing the doctor scheduled to operate on my granddaughter." His voice was dangerously calm. "Why? To silence us," Avery suggested. "We're getting too close to whatever he's hiding." "Or to secure his position," Brandon added. "If Jeremiah is being held somewhere, and now there's proof of his child, a direct Redwood heir, Leon loses everything," Maxwell finished. "The inheritance, the company control, everything he's been positioning himself for." Avery stood abruptly. "I don't care about inheritances or company control. My daughter needs heart surgery within 6 weeks or she could die. That's all that matters to me." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "She's right," Maxwell said eventually. "Daisy is the priority." He turned to Harriet. "Who's the best pediatric cardiac surgeon you know of? Not in Grand Harbor, anywhere." "Dr. Helena Morris at Boston Children's," Harriet replied without hesitation. "But she's booked months in advance, and the cost is irrelevant," Maxwell interrupted, "and schedules can be adjusted for the right reasons." He picked up his phone, dialing. "Janet, contact Dr. Helena Morris at Boston Children's Hospital. Whatever it takes to get her to Grand Harbor within the week. Private jet, accommodations at the peninsula, triple her usual fee. Just make it happen." He hung up and faced the group. "Daisy will be transferred to Redwood Memorial's private wing tomorrow. Full security detail. Restricted access, doctor. Morris will perform the surgery there." Avery shook her head. "Redwood Memorial is the most expensive hospital in the state. My insurance won't—" "Daisy is a Redwood," Maxwell stated, his tone brooking no argument. "Her medical care is my responsibility." Avery swallowed hard, pride warring with practical necessity. "And what about Jeremiah, while Daisy's being treated? Leon will know we're onto him, if Jeremiah is at that facility." "I'll find him," Brandon promised. "Now that we know where to look." "Not alone," Maxwell said. "I'm coming with you." Avery stared at him. "You'd leave Daisy during her surgery." Something vulnerable flashed across Maxwell's face. "She has you? Jeremiah has no one." He hesitated. "Unless you'd prefer I stay." The question hung in the air, loaded with unspoken emotions and years of mistrust. "Daisy asks about you," Avery admitted reluctantly. "She likes her new friend Mr. Maxwell with the eyes like hers." Maxwell nodded, understanding the olive branch being cautiously extended. "Then I'll stay until she's out of surgery. Brandon can gather intelligence on the facility, but wait for me before attempting extraction. There's something else." Avery said quietly. She reached into her bag and removed a small, leather-bound book, Jeremiah's complete diary. I've kept it hidden all these years. Maxwell stared at it, barely breathing. You should read it before you go after him, Avery continued. There are things in there. Things he discovered about Redwood Enterprises, about Leon, about... She faltered. About what? Maxwell prompted. About Jeremiah's true parentage, Avery finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Things that will change everything you think you know about your family. Dr. Helena Morris was a force of nature packed into a 5'2" frame, with steel gray hair cut in a precise bob and black-rimmed glasses that she peered over rather than through. She exuded competence and command from the moment she strode into Daisy's hospital room at Redwood Memorial. So you're my patient, she said, examining Daisy with keen eyes. I hear you want to be a doctor someday. Daisy nodded, instantly captivated by the diminutive surgeon. A heart doctor like you? Well then, consider this your first lesson, Dr. Morris replied, pulling up a chair and unfolding a simplified anatomical diagram of the heart. This is your VSD, ventricular septal defect, essentially a hole between these two chambers. As the surgeon explained the procedure in child-friendly terms, Avery watched from the doorway. Relief and fear battling within her, Maxwell stood beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. She's the best there is, he assured her quietly. I've had 3 specialists review Daisy's case. They all agree. Dr. Morris is her best chance. Avery nodded mutely, unable to express the tornado of emotions swirling inside her. In just 1 week, her carefully constructed life had been completely upended. Daisy was now in a private suite at the city's most exclusive hospital. The cleaning job that had barely covered groceries had been replaced by a Redwood family credit card that Maxwell insisted she use for anything Daisy needs. And the man who had once humiliated her was now standing guard over her daughter like a sentinel. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Maxwell continued. Dr. Morris wants to proceed immediately, given Daisy's latest test results. That soon, Avery's voice caught. Her condition is deteriorating faster than anticipated, Maxwell said gently. The sooner we act, the better her chances. Avery closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. And Jeremiah, any word from Brandon? He's confirmed security patterns at the facility. There's a patient in the East Wing who matches Jeremiah's description. Brandon's establishing a cover as a potential new client to get inside for visual confirmation. And if it is him, Maxwell's expression hardened. Then, as soon as Daisy is stable, I'm bringing my son home. Inside the room, Daisy laughed at something Dr. Morris said, the sound like bells in the sterile hospital environment. Both adults turned to watch her, momentarily united in their concern for the child who connected them. She has your strength, Maxwell observed quietly. And Jeremiah's heart, Avery replied. Too big for its own good sometimes. For the first time since their confrontation in his study, the ghost of a genuine smile touched Maxwell's lips. Then she'll be just fine. Neither of them noticed the unmarked van parked across the street, its windows tinted black. A camera lens capturing their every move, Maxwell sat alone in his study, Jeremiah's diary open before him. Outside, dawn was breaking over Grand Harbor, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender. He hadn't slept. How could he? With the truths revealed in these pages, the handwriting was so achingly familiar, strong, precise strokes that mirrored Jeremiah's personality. The early entries detailed mundane business observations, but about halfway through, the tone shifted dramatically. March 15th, found discrepancies in the offshore accounts, $2.3 million missing from Jakarta project, Leon's signature on all the transfer docs. Confronted him privately. He laughed it off as creative accounting, not convinced. April 2nd, more irregularities. Dummy corporations receiving Redwood funds, all trace back to L. Need hard evidence before approaching Dad. August 10th, accessed L's private server, discovered emails discussing eliminating obstacles. Context suggests he means Dad. Taking backup drives home tonight. September 14th, overheard L on phone discussing medication dosages, Dad's medication. Switching pill samples tonight to test. September 20th, lab results confirm suspicions. Dad's heart medication being replaced with something else. Confronted L. Violent argument, he claimed was trying to protect company from Dad's irrational decisions. Threatened to go public. Telling Dad everything tomorrow after I pick up Avery. September 21st. Made shocking discovery in old files. Birth certificate. DNA test hidden in safe behind painting in Elle's office. Dad isn't my biological father. Elle is. Result of affair with my mother while Dad was in Tokyo. Explains hatred between them. Changes everything. Still telling Dad tonight. He deserves truth. Heading to meet Avery now. That was the final entry. The next day, Jeremiah had vanished. Maxwell closed the diary. A storm of emotions battling within him. The betrayal cut deep. His wife and his half-brother. The knowledge that Jeremiah, whom he'd raised and loved as his own flesh and blood, carried Leon's DNA instead of his. Yet somehow, that revelation paled in comparison to what Leon had done afterward. Not just embezzlement or corporate espionage, but attempted murder, drugging Maxwell, kidnapping Jeremiah, and now threatening Daisy. His phone buzzed. Brandon Cole. "I'm inside," Brandon said without preamble, posing as a wealthy tech CEO touring the facility for his troubled brother. Security is tight but manageable. And Maxwell's knuckles turned white around the phone. "East Wing, room 237. It's him, sir. I caught a glimpse during their therapy session. He's thin, sedated, but it's definitely Jeremiah." Maxwell closed his eyes briefly, relief and rage warring within him. What's his condition? Hard to assess from what I saw. Physically mobile but heavily medicated. Nurses mentioned breakthrough moments. When he becomes more lucid, they increase his dosage when that happens. "Can you get him out?" "Not alone," Brandon replied. "We need a team and medical support. He'll need proper detox." "I'm coming to you," Maxwell decided. "Tomorrow, after Daisy's surgery, have everything ready." After hanging up, Maxwell turned to the window, watching the sun now fully risen over the city he'd spent a lifetime conquering. What was it all worth? His empire, built on lies and manipulation, while his family was systematically destroyed. For the first time in decades, Maxwell Redwood wept. In room 237 of Highlands Wellness Institute, Jeremiah Redwood sat by the window, staring at the manicured grounds below. At 38, he looked older, his once athletic frame gaunt, his dark hair threaded with premature gray, his mind trapped in a perpetual fog. Today was one of his more lucid days. The new night nurse had made a mistake with his evening medication, giving him a lower dose than prescribed. The resulting clarity was both blessing and torture. 8 years. He'd pieced that much together from overheard conversations and the changing seasons outside his window. 8 years since he'd discovered the truth about Leon, about his parentage, about the plot against his father. No, not his father. Maxwell, the man who had raised him. Avery's face came to him through the mental haze. Beautiful, brilliant Avery with her medical textbooks and quick laugh. Had she looked for him? Had she believed the lies Leon surely told about his disappearance? There had been a baby. He remembered that much. Avery had been pregnant when he was taken. A child who would now be 7, 8. A child who might have his eyes, his smile. A child who would think their father had abandoned them. The door opened. Dr. Shields entered with a nurse, medication tray in hand. "Good morning, Jeremiah. Time for your treatment." Jeremiah didn't respond. He'd learned that resistance led to forced injections, isolation rooms, better to appear compliant while holding onto the fragments of himself in secret. "We've adjusted your medication," Dr. Shields continued, watching as the nurse prepared a syringe. "You've been experiencing some breakthrough memories that we need to manage." "Of course," Jeremiah replied flatly, extending his arm. As the needle slid into his vein, he focused on the face that kept him going through the chemical fog. Avery. Her name became his silent mantra as the drugs pulled him back into darkness. Across town at Redwood Memorial Hospital, final preparations for Daisy's surgery were underway. Dr. Helena Morris reviewed the latest scans with her team, while Avery sat beside her daughter's bed, attempting to appear calm despite her internal terror. "Remember what Dr. Morris said," Avery murmured, smoothing Daisy's hair. 8 hours for the surgery, then you'll wake up in recovery with a special monitor to make sure your heart is behaving itself. Daisy nodded solemnly. "And then I'll have a super cool scar to show my friends." "That's right," Avery managed a smile, marveling at her daughter's courage. A soft knock at the door announced Maxwell's arrival. He'd traded his usual power suit for casual slacks and a sweater, an outfit that made him look more grandfather than corporate titan. "Good morning, Daisy," he said, his voice gentler than Avery had ever heard it. "I brought you something." He produced a small silver charm bracelet with a single heart-shaped charm. "It's a tradition in our family. A token for courage. My mother gave one to me before my tonsillectomy when I was about your age." Daisy's eyes widened as Maxwell fastened it around her wrist. "It's beautiful. The heart is made from the same silver as the Redwood family medallion," he explained, careful to avoid looking at Avery. For strength, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "It's time, Daisy. We need to get you prepped." What followed was a blur of activity. Daisy being wheeled toward the operating room, last-minute instructions from Dr. Morris, promises that they'd be right there when she woke up. Then, abruptly, silence in the empty hospital room. Avery stood frozen, staring at the door through which her daughter had disappeared. Maxwell remained equally still, both of them suspended in the terrible moment of surrender to forces beyond their control. "She'll be fine," Maxwell said finally, sounding like he was trying to convince himself as much as Avery. "You read the diary," Avery observed. Not a question. Maxwell nodded, his expression unreadable. "All of it. Then you know that Jeremiah isn't biologically mine." "Yes." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "It changes nothing about how I feel about him." "Or Daisy." Avery studied him, searching for deception and finding none. Brandon called. "He found Jeremiah, confirmed it's him." Maxwell's voice caught slightly. "Heavily sedated but alive. We're going to get him out tomorrow." "I should be there," Avery said. "Your place is here with Daisy. He's my husband," Maxwell conceded with a slight nod. "We'll figure it out after the surgery." They moved to the surgical waiting area, a private room Maxwell had arranged, and settled in for the long wait. Minutes stretched into hours of tense silence, occasional updates from surgical nurses, and countless cups of mediocre coffee. 4 hours into the surgery, Maxwell's phone rang. The caller ID displayed Brandon Cole. "What is it?" Maxwell answered tensely. "We're in the middle of Daisy's—" Brandon's urgent voice cut him off. "They're moving him, sir. Tonight, I overheard Dr. Shields ordering preparations for patient J to be transferred to a more secure location. There's a medical transport scheduled for midnight." Maxwell's face hardened. "Where?" "Unknown. But once they move him, we may never find him again." Maxwell looked at Avery, torn between impossible choices. Jeremiah could disappear forever if they didn't act now, but Daisy was still on the operating table, her future uncertain. "Go," Avery said quietly, reading his expression. "Bring him home. Daisy and I will be waiting." Maxwell hesitated. "Are you sure?" "She has me. She has Dr. Morris. Jeremiah has no one." Avery echoed his words from earlier. "I'll call the moment she's out of surgery." With a brief nod, Maxwell was gone, already on the phone arranging his helicopter to Rustwood Highlands. Avery returned to her lonely vigil, praying for both her daughter and the husband she hadn't seen in 8 years. The operating room at Redwood Memorial gleamed under harsh lights, a symphony of beeping monitors and hushed professional voices. Dr. Helena Morris stood over Daisy's small form, her hands steady as she directed her team through the delicate procedure. "Cardiopulmonary bypass established," the perfusionist reported. "Patient is stable." Dr. Morris nodded, focused entirely on repairing the hole between Daisy's ventricles. What had begun as a routine VSD closure had become more complex as they discovered additional structural abnormalities not visible on previous scans. "We've got more extensive damage than anticipated," she informed her team calmly. "The septal defect has multiple components, and there's significant pulmonary hypertension. We'll need to adjust our approach." In the observation room above the operating theater, Nurse Harriet watched anxiously. She'd taken a personal day from Grand Harbor Municipal to be here, unable to abandon Daisy and Avery at this critical moment. Through the glass, she could see Dr. Morris working with practiced precision, but also the complications that were extending what should have been a 4-hour surgery well into its 6th hour. Her phone vibrated, a text from the private security team Maxwell had hired. Unknown male attempted to access surgical floor, intercepted and removed. Description matches Dr. Finley. Harriet's blood ran cold, even with all their precautions. Leon's influence had nearly reached Daisy. She hurried down to the surgical waiting area where Avery sat alone, pale and exhausted. "Any updates?" Avery asked immediately. "The surgery's taking longer than expected," Harriet explained gently. "Dr. Morris found additional complications, but she's addressing them. Daisy's holding steady." She hesitated before adding, "There was a security incident. Dr. Finley attempted to access the surgical floor. He was stopped." Avery's eyes widened in alarm. "He was going to... He didn't get anywhere near Daisy," Harriet assured her quickly. "The security team handled it, but it confirms our suspicions about Leon's intentions." Avery stood, nervous energy propelling her to pace the small room. "Maxwell's gone to rescue Jeremiah. We're all exposed, vulnerable. What if Leon has other people here? What if..." "Avery," Harriet interrupted firmly. "I've worked in hospitals for 35 years. Trust me when I say Daisy couldn't be in better hands than Dr. Morris's. And I'm not leaving until she's safely in recovery." Avery nodded gratefully, drawing strength from the older woman's steadfast presence. "How much longer, do you think?" "Another hour, maybe 2. Dr. Morris won't rush. That's a good thing." As they settled back into their anxious wait, neither woman noticed the custodian who lingered too long outside the waiting room door, nor the brief call he made after moving down the hallway. The Redwood helicopter cut through the night sky, its rotors a thunderous heartbeat against the darkness. Inside, Maxwell checked his watch. 10:37 p.m. Less than 90 minutes until Jeremiah's scheduled transfer. Beside him, Brandon reviewed the building schematics one final time. "East Wing, room 237, he reminded Maxwell. "Security is heaviest at the main entrance. We'll use the service access on the north side. I've got keycard clones and the security rotation schedule." Also on board were 4 men from Maxwell's private security team, former Special Forces operatives who asked no questions when given their unusual assignment. They would create a diversion at the main entrance while Maxwell and Brandon extracted Jeremiah. "The helicopter will hold position 2 miles out," Brandon continued. "Once we have Jeremiah, we radio for pickup in the clearing here." He pointed to a spot on the digital map. Maxwell nodded, his mind partially elsewhere. No updates from the hospital meant Daisy was still in surgery. The weight of dual responsibilities, to his son and granddaughter, pressed upon him like a physical force. "He may not recognize you," Brandon warned quietly. "From what I observed, he's heavily sedated, possibly been that way for years." "He'll know me," Maxwell replied with more confidence than he felt. The pilot's voice came through their headsets. "Approaching drop zone in 5 minutes, sir." Maxwell checked the secure phone he'd left with Avery. Still no messages. He sent a quick text. "En route to J. Updates on D." The reply came almost immediately. "Still in surgery. Complications, but stable. Focus on J. We're okay." He tucked the phone away, squaring his shoulders as the helicopter began its descent. After 8 years of searching, he was finally bringing his son home. In the operating room, alarms suddenly blared as Daisy's blood pressure dropped precipitously. "Pulmonary pressure spiking," the anesthesiologist reported urgently. "BP 80/40 and falling." Dr. Morris remained perfectly calm, her hands steady. "She's reacting to the patch material. Switch to bovine pericardium and prepare for temporary pacing." The surgical team moved with practiced efficiency. No wasted motions. Despite the crisis, Dr. Morris guided them through the necessary adjustments, her voice never rising above its usual measured tone. "Heart rate stabilizing," the anesthesiologist reported after several tense minutes. "BP coming back up, 90/50, 160. "Well done, everyone," Dr. Morris acknowledged. "Now let's close this final section and get this young lady to recovery." In the waiting room, Avery and Harriet remained unaware of the crisis that had been averted, the surgical team seeing no need to frighten the family with complications they'd successfully managed. Highlands Wellness Institute resembled a luxury resort more than a medical facility, its grounds meticulously landscaped, its security discreetly omnipresent. Brandon led Maxwell through the service entrance, both men dressed in maintenance uniforms complete with fake IDs clipped to their pockets. "Night rounds in 10 minutes, Brandon murmured, checking his watch. "We'll have a 5-minute window when the East Wing corridor is clear." They moved through the dimly lit hallways, Brandon navigating with the confidence of someone who'd studied the layout extensively. At precisely 11:17 p.m., The diversionary team triggered a fire alarm in the administrative wing, drawing security personnel away from their positions. "Now," Brandon whispered. They moved quickly down the east corridor. Reaching room 237 without encountering staff, the electronic lock yielded to Brandon's cloned keycard. Maxwell pushed the door open, his heart pounding. The room was spacious and well-appointed, more luxury hotel suite than hospital room. Sitting in a chair by the window, facing away from them, was a gaunt figure with graying dark hair. "Jeremiah," Maxwell whispered. The figure turned slowly, eyes unfocused. Years of medication had hollowed his cheeks and dulled the piercing green eyes that were the Redwood family hallmark. But beneath the physical changes, it was unmistakably Jeremiah. "Dad." The word came out slurred, uncertain. Maxwell moved forward, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "It's me, son. I've come to take you home." Confusion clouded Jeremiah's features. "Not real. Never real. I'm real," Maxwell insisted, kneeling before his son. "Leon kept you here, drugged you, but we know the truth now. Avery found us." At Avery's name, something sparked in Jeremiah's eyes. "Avery, where?" "Waiting for you," Maxwell assured him, signaling Brandon to check the hallway. "We need to go now." "Can't," Jeremiah mumbled. "Pills. Too many pills." "We have medical support ready," Maxwell explained, helping Jeremiah to his feet. "Everything's arranged, but we have to move." They had just reached the door when Brandon tensed. "Company," he warned softly. Voices approached from the hallway. Doctor, Shields, and 2 security guards, discussing the fire alarm and upcoming transfer. Ahead of schedule, the helicopter arrives at midnight. "I want patient J ready for transfer immediately." Maxwell and Brandon exchanged glances. There was no other exit from the room. "New plan," Brandon whispered, drawing his concealed weapon. "I create a distraction. You get Jeremiah to the north emergency exit. The team will meet you there." Before Maxwell could object, Brandon slipped into the hallway, moving away from Jeremiah's room and deliberately making himself visible to the approaching group. "Hey, this area is restricted," a security guard shouted. Brandon took off running in the opposite direction of Maxwell and Jeremiah's escape route, drawing their pursuers away. Maxwell supported Jeremiah's unsteady frame as they moved toward the emergency exit, every step achingly slow. Distant shouts and the sound of running footsteps indicated that Brandon had successfully drawn away their pursuers. But for how long? They reached the north exit just as the facility's alarm system activated fully. Brandon's diversion had escalated. Outside, the cool night air hit Jeremiah like a physical shock after years of climate-controlled confinement. "Almost there," Maxwell encouraged, as they moved toward the tree line where their extraction team waited. The crack of gunfire split the night. Maxwell felt a sudden searing pain in his shoulder, spinning him around, behind them. 2 security guards had emerged from a side door, weapons drawn. "Down!" Maxwell pushed Jeremiah to the ground, shielding him with his own body. Despite the burning pain in his shoulder, more gunfire erupted, but this time from the trees as the extraction team returned fire, forcing the guards to retreat. "Mr. Redwood," one of the security team emerged from cover, rushing to assist them. "You're hit, sir." "Get my son out of here," Maxwell ordered through gritted teeth. "That's all that matters." As they hurried toward the clearing where the helicopter waited, Maxwell's phone buzzed with an incoming call. With his good arm, he managed to answer it. Avery's voice came through, tight with emotion. "Daisy's out of surgery, Dr. Morris says it went well. She's in recovery now." Relief flooded through him, momentarily dulling the pain of his gunshot wound. "We've got him," he responded. "We're coming home." Daisy floated in a hazy world between sleep and wakefulness, vaguely aware of soft beeping sounds and hushed voices. Her chest felt strange, heavy and sore, but not with the familiar tightness she'd lived with for years. Different. Better, somehow. "Her vitals are stable," a woman's voice said. "The surgery went exceptionally well, all things considered." "When will she wake up?" That was her mother's voice, tight with worry. "Soon the anesthesia is wearing off. Children are remarkably resilient." Daisy wanted to open her eyes, to tell her mother she was okay, but her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. She drifted back into darkness. In the recovery room, Avery sat beside her daughter's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of Daisy's chest. Dr. Morris had assured her that despite the complications, the surgery had been a complete success. The ventricular septal defect was fully repaired, the additional structural issues addressed, with proper follow-up care. Daisy could expect a normal, healthy life, after 7 years of hospital visits. Medications and constant worry. The words seemed almost unreal. Nurse Harriet entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Any change?" Avery shook her head, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Dr. Morris says she'll wake soon." "You should rest," Harriet advised, taking the chair opposite. "It's been 12 hours since you've slept." "I can't," Avery replied, her gaze fixed on Daisy's peaceful face. "Not until she wakes up. Not until Jeremiah," her voice caught. Harriet nodded, understanding. "The security team reported they're en route. Should be here within the hour." The thought of seeing Jeremiah after 8 years sent a wave of conflicting emotions through Avery. Hope, fear, anger, longing. What state would he be in after years of drugged captivity? Would he remember her? Remember them? And what of Leon? The man who had orchestrated this entire nightmare was still out there, undoubtedly furious that his carefully constructed plans were unraveling. "We've doubled security on this floor," Harriet said, seemingly reading her thoughts. "No one gets in without proper clearance and identification." A soft moan from the bed drew their attention. Daisy's eyelids fluttered. "Daisy, sweetheart?" Avery leaned forward, stroking her daughter's hair. "Can you hear me?" Daisy's eyes opened slowly, those distinctive redwood green eyes now cloudy with medication. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm right here, baby. The surgery's over. Doctor, Morris fixed your heart." A small smile touched Daisy's lips. "Told you? I'm tough." Tears of relief spilled down Avery's cheeks. "The toughest?" The Redwood Memorial Hospital helipad blazed with lights as the medical helicopter touched down. Emergency staff rushed forward with gurneys for both Maxwell and Jeremiah, despite Maxwell's insistence that he could walk. Shoulder wound, through and through. The flight medic reported to the trauma team. "Patient 2 is heavily sedated with unknown substances, possible long-term pharmaceutical dependency." Brandon Cole followed behind as they wheeled both men into the hospital. His face was bruised, his left arm bandaged where a security guard's bullet had grazed him, but he'd completed his mission. Against all odds, they had extracted Jeremiah from Highlands Wellness Institute. "Get a tox screen immediately," the trauma doctor ordered as they moved Jeremiah to the ICU. "I want to know exactly what's in his system." Maxwell, despite the medical team's efforts to take him to a separate treatment room, refused to be separated from his son. "Same room," he insisted. "I'm not leaving him." While the medical team worked on them both, Maxwell contacted his security team. "Lock down the mansion, change all security codes, and put a team on Leon. I want to know his exact location at all times." "Already done." "Sir," his head of security confirmed. "Leon was last seen leaving his downtown penthouse 30 minutes ago. We have a tail on him. Double the protection detail on Daisy's room." "Yes, sir. Ms. Carter and the child are secure." Maxwell stared at Jeremiah, who lay unconscious as doctors and nurses worked around him. 8 years of searching, of wondering, of grieving. His son, not biologically but in every way that mattered, was finally home. A doctor approached Maxwell's bedside with preliminary blood test results. "Mr. Redwood, your son has multiple sedatives and antipsychotics in his system, some at dangerously high levels. We're starting detox protocols immediately, but the process will be difficult. Withdrawal from these medications can be extremely challenging." "Will he recover?" Maxwell asked, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "With time and proper care, yes. But it won't be quick, and it won't be easy." The doctor hesitated. "There may be some cognitive impacts, memory issues, emotional regulation challenges. We won't know the full extent until the drugs clear his system." Maxwell nodded grimly. "He'll have the best care available, whatever he needs." Once the doctors had finished treating his shoulder wound, Maxwell insisted on being taken to Daisy's room. He needed to see his granddaughter, to know with his own eyes that both his son and granddaughter were safe. When he entered Daisy's recovery room, Avery rose immediately. "Jeremiah, he's here, in the IQ, heavily sedated, but alive," Maxwell's voice caught. "They're working on detoxing him now." Avery's legs gave way. and she sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the reality that her husband was finally within reach after 8 endless years. "You're hurt," she noted, seeing the bandage peeking out from Maxwell's hospital gown. "It's nothing, barely a scratch." He moved to Daisy's bedside, studying her sleeping face with undisguised tenderness. "How is she?" "The surgery was successful," Avery replied. "Dr. Morris says she'll make a complete recovery." Maxwell gently took Daisy's small hand in his. "She has the Redwood strength." "Mr. Redwood," Harriet interrupted softly from the doorway. "There's a situation. Your security team just reported that Leon has entered the hospital." Maxwell stiffened. "How?" "He used his position on the hospital board to override the security protocols. He's demanding to see you and Jeremiah." "Where is he now?" "Arguing with security outside the ICU. He's claiming you've kidnapped a mentally ill patient who requires specialized care." Maxwell's expression darkened. "He won't get near Jeremiah again. Or Daisy." He turned to Avery. "Stay here with Daisy. Don't leave this room for any reason, Harriet. Please stay with them." "Where are you going?" Avery asked, alarmed. "To end this," Maxwell replied, his voice like steel. "Once and for all," as Maxwell left the room. Avery felt a chill of foreboding. 8 years of lies and manipulation had culminated in this moment, both Daisy and Jeremiah fighting for recovery in the same hospital, while the man responsible for their suffering prowled the corridors. "Will they be okay?" she asked Harriet, her voice barely above a whisper. Harriet took her hand firmly. "Maxwell Redwood built half this city. Leon may think he's clever, but he's never understood what truly makes someone powerful. It's not money or schemes. It's what you're willing to fight for." Outside in the corridor, they heard the security team reinforcing their position. Additional guards arriving to form a human barrier around Daisy's room. Through the window, the first hints of dawn were breaking over Grand Harbor. A new day that would determine whether the fractured Redwood family could finally begin to heal, or whether Leon's destructive obsession would claim more victims. Maxwell moved through the hospital corridors with determined strides, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. 2 security guards flanked him, their expressions grim. The hospital staff parted before them, sensing the tension that radiated from the powerful businessman as they approached the IQ. Maxwell could hear Leon's voice, smooth, reasonable, persuasive, the voice that had charmed investors and politicians for decades while concealing a ruthless ambition. A dangerous misunderstanding. "My nephew requires specialized care. His condition causes paranoid delusions. Maxwell is acting irrationally due to his own health issues." Maxwell rounded the corner to find Leon surrounded by 3 men in expensive suits, his lawyers. Undoubtedly, facing off against Brandon Cole and the hospital's head of security, Leon. Maxwell's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Leon turned, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Maxwell, thank God, this unfortunate situation has gotten completely out of hand." "Has it?" Maxwell replied coldly. "Jeremiah needs to return to Highlands immediately. His doctors there understand his condition. He's been under their care for years." Leon's performance was flawless. The concerned uncle, the voice of reason. 8 years, Maxwell corrected. "He's been their prisoner for 8 years, since the night you had him kidnapped." Leon's face registered shocked offense, perfectly calibrated for their audience. "That's absurd. You're not well, Maxwell. These conspiracy theories." "We have Jeremiah's diary," Maxwell interrupted. "We have financial records of your payments to Highlands. We have Dr. Shields in custody, who I suspect will be quite forthcoming once the FBI gets involved." Something flickered in Leon's eyes, the first crack in his composure. "This is slander. My lawyers will—" "Your lawyers can't help you with attempted murder, kidnapping, and corporate fraud," Maxwell continued, moving closer. "It's over, Leon." For a moment, something like genuine regret crossed Leon's features. "You never understood, did you? What I did for the company, for the family legacy. You were making emotional decisions, putting the business at risk. So you drugged me, kidnapped my son, tried to kill my granddaughter." "Granddaughter?" Leon's surprise seemed genuine, but he recovered quickly. "Another delusion. You don't have a granddaughter." "Daisy Carter," Maxwell stated flatly. 7 years old, Jeremiah's daughter with Avery. The child you tried to eliminate through Dr. Finley. Leon's lawyers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not briefed on this aspect of the situation. I think we should continue this discussion privately, one of the lawyers suggested, attempting to defuse the situation. There's nothing to discuss, Maxwell replied, never taking his eyes off Leon. Security will escort Mr. Redwood from the premises. The police have been notified. Leon's pleasant mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. You can't prove anything, Maxwell. And even if you could, do you really want the world to know our family's dirty laundry? That Jeremiah is actually my son, not yours. The surrounding staff and security team froze at this revelation. Maxwell didn't flinch. Do you think I care about that now? He asked quietly. Jeremiah is my son in every way that matters. And I'm taking back everything you've stolen from him, from all of us. Something dangerous flashed in Leon's eyes. Let me see him. Never again. He's my son. Leon's composure shattered completely, his voice rising to a shout. Mine by blood. You had everything. Our father's approval, the company, the Redwood name, while I was treated like an afterthought. Even when I gave you an heir, you never knew. Security moved forward, but Maxwell held up a hand, stopping them. Why keep him alive then? Why not just kill him too? Leon's expression shifted, something almost human flickering across his features. I couldn't. He's my blood, the only thing truly mine in this family. So you imprisoned him instead, destroyed his mind, took him from his wife, his child. Maxwell shook his head in disgust. You call that fatherly love? I protected him from you, Leon snarled. From your weakness, your sentimentality that would have destroyed everything our grandfather built. Mr. Redwood, a police officer interrupted, approaching with several colleagues. We need you to come with us. Leon straightened his jacket, his mask of civility slipping back into place. This is a misunderstanding. My lawyers will sort it out. To Maxwell, he added coldly, this isn't over, as the police escorted Leon away. Maxwell turned to Brandon. Double the security on both rooms. He's not done yet. Already on it, Brandon confirmed. His lawyers will have him out on bail within hours. Then we need to move quickly, Maxwell decided. Get me the hospital administrator and Dr. Morris. We need to secure an isolated area for Jeremiah's recovery where Leon can't reach him. As Brandon left to make arrangements, Maxwell returned to the IQ where Jeremiah lay unconscious, medical staff monitoring his vital signs as the detox process began. Maxwell sank into a chair beside the bed, the adrenaline of confrontation fading, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion. I'm sorry, he whispered to Jeremiah's still form. I should have seen through Leon's lies. Should have looked harder, fought harder to find you. A nurse approached quietly. His latest blood work shows the medications are beginning to clear. He might wake soon, but he'll be disoriented, possibly agitated. I'll be here, Maxwell assured her, left alone with his son. Maxwell finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of the last 8 years. The loss, the manipulation, the time stolen from all of them. Most painfully, he faced the truth that his own blindness to Leon's nature had enabled this tragedy. His phone buzzed with a text from Avery. Daisy asking for you. She's more awake now. Maxwell smiled faintly, finding hope in those simple words. He texted back. Tell her I'll visit soon. How are you holding up? The reply came quickly, 1 minute at a time. Any change with Jay? Doctors say he might wake soon. We'll let you know immediately. Maxwell pocketed his phone, his gaze returning to Jeremiah's face. Despite the years and hardship, he could still see the determined boy who had challenged him at every turn. The brilliant young man who had questioned business practices others accepted without thought. The son who had made him proud every day of his life. Biology be damned. Jeremiah was his son. A slight movement caught his attention. Jeremiah's fingers twitching against the white hospital sheet. Then his eyelids fluttered, struggling to open. Jeremiah. Maxwell leaned forward, hope surging in his chest. Can you hear me? Jeremiah's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they fixed on Maxwell's face. Confusion, fear, and then a flicker of recognition crossed his features. Dad. The word was raspy, uncertain. Yes, son, it's me. Maxwell fought to keep his voice steady. You're safe now. Jeremiah's gaze darted around the room, panic rising. Where? How? You're in Redwood Memorial Hospital. We got you out of Highlands. Leon can't hurt you anymore. At Leon's name, Jeremiah tensed visibly. Leon, He couldn't finish the sentence. I know, Maxwell said gently. I know everything. It doesn't change anything between us. Tears filled Jeremiah's eyes. Avery, he whispered. The baby. Avery is here, and your daughter Daisy. She's 7 now. Beautiful, brave, and smart as a whip. Maxwell smiled. She has your eyes. A tear slipped down Jeremiah's cheek. I want to see them. Soon, Maxwell promised. You both need to recover first. Jeremiah's hand moved weakly toward Maxwell's, and Maxwell took it, holding it firmly. Rest now, he urged. You're home, as Jeremiah drifted back to sleep. Maxwell remained by his side, holding vigil against the dangers he knew still lurked beyond the hospital walls. Leon might be temporarily contained, but a man with his resources and desperation remained a threat. The battle for the Redwood family was far from over. 1 year later, morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the east wing of the Redwood mansion, illuminating the construction that had transformed the once formal space, where mahogany-paneled walls and priceless artwork had once dominated. Medical equipment and cheerful, child-friendly murals now brightened the rooms. The sign above the entrance read, Redwood Pediatric Cardiac Center, Phase 1. Avery stood in what had once been Maxwell's formal dining room, now converted into a reception area, reviewing patient files with Nurse Harriet. At 31, Avery looked younger than she had a year ago, the weight of constant worry lifted from her shoulders, replaced by purpose and hope. 3 more referrals this week, Harriet noted, handing Avery the folders. Word is spreading about our scholarship program. Avery nodded, scanning the information. I'll review these with Dr. Morris this afternoon. These families need answers quickly. The scholarship program had been Avery's idea, providing free cardiac care to children whose families couldn't afford treatment. Maxwell had not only embraced the concept, but expanded it beyond anything Avery had initially imagined. The temporary facility in the East Wing was just the beginning. Construction on a state-of-the-art pediatric cardiac hospital was already underway on the Redwood estate grounds. Mom? Daisy's voice rang out as she burst into the reception area. Her cheeks flushed with excitement. At 8, she was the picture of health. Her surgery a complete success. Her recovery exceeding all expectations. Dad's having a good day. He remembered the whole story from last night. Avery's heart leaped. Jeremiah's recovery had been a long, arduous process. The years of forced medication had left his memory fragmented, his cognitive functions sometimes unreliable. Good days were becoming more frequent, but they still celebrated each one. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Avery replied, sharing a meaningful glance with Harriet. Where is he now? In the garden with Grandpa. They're looking at blueprints again. Avery smiled, still occasionally struck by how naturally Daisy had taken to calling Maxwell Grandpa. Despite having known him for just over a year, their bond had been immediate and profound, as though making up for lost time with extra intensity after finishing her work. Avery made her way through the mansion to the garden terrace. There she found Jeremiah and Maxwell bent over architectural plans spread across a table, deep in discussion. At 39, Jeremiah still showed signs of his ordeal, occasional tremors in his hands, premature gray threading his dark hair. Moments when his focus drifted unexpectedly, but the haunted look that had dominated his eyes in those first months had largely faded. The surgical wing needs more natural light, Jeremiah was saying, pointing to the blueprints. Remember how important that was during my recovery. Patients heal better with sunlight. Maxwell nodded thoughtfully. We can extend these windows, add skylights here and here. It was still strange sometimes, watching them together. The biological truth of their relationship known but largely irrelevant to the father-son bond they'd always shared. If anything, the revelation had strengthened their connection, forged in the crucible of shared trauma and recovery. Good morning, Avery called, joining them on the terrace. Both men looked up, identical green eyes brightening at her approach. Jeremiah rose to greet her with a kiss, something he never failed to do, as though making up for 8 years of missed opportunities. Daisy says you're having a good day, Avery said, taking his hand. Jeremiah nodded. The new medication regimen is working, Doctor. Patel says another 6 months, and we might be able to reduce the dosage again. The recovery process had been as much about carefully removing the harmful drugs from his system as it had been about healing psychologically. Each withdrawal had brought new challenges: nightmares, anxiety, temporary memory lapses, but also brought back more of the man Avery had married. We're finalizing the plans for the main facility, Maxwell explained, his pride evident. Construction begins next month. The Redwood Pediatric Cardiac Center would be his legacy, not the business empire he'd spent decades building, but this healing place born from his family's suffering. The corporate empire still existed, of course, now run by a board of directors with Maxwell maintaining oversight, but his heart, like Jeremiah's, had found new purpose in healing rather than acquisition. Have you seen the news? Avery asked quietly. Both men's expressions darkened slightly. They knew what she meant without elaboration. Leon's trial had concluded the previous week, despite his expensive legal team's efforts. The evidence against him had been overwhelming. Brandon Cole's meticulous investigation had uncovered not just the crimes against Jeremiah, but a pattern of corporate fraud, blackmail, and corruption spanning decades. The diary had been particularly damning, corroborated by financial records and testimony from Dr. Shields, who had turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency. 20 years, Maxwell confirmed. No possibility of parole for at least 15. The appeals process has already started, Jeremiah added, a shadow crossing his face. His lawyers filed yesterday. It won't change anything, Maxwell assured him. The evidence is ironclad. They fell silent for a moment, each lost in thoughts of the man whose jealousy and ambition had nearly destroyed them all. Have you decided? Avery asked gently. About visiting him. Jeremiah stared out at the garden, where Daisy was now playing with a golden retriever puppy, a recent addition to the family. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that, he admitted, but I did write him a letter. This was news to both Avery and Maxwell. What did you say? Maxwell asked carefully. That I know he's my biological father, that I understand the difference between being a father and being a dad. Jeremiah looked at Maxwell meaningfully, and that I forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine, so I can move forward without carrying his poison inside me. Maxwell's hand came to rest on Jeremiah's shoulder, a gesture of profound pride and understanding. The moment was interrupted by Daisy bounding up the terrace steps, the puppy at her heels. Mom, Dad, Grandpa, can I show Scout the new clinic rooms? Dr. Morris said it might be good to have a therapy dog when the real patients come. That sounds like an excellent idea, Maxwell agreed. Perhaps you could help design a program for it. Research what other hospitals do with therapy animals. Daisy's face lit up at being given such important responsibility. I'll make a whole presentation, with charts and everything. As she dashed off with renewed purpose, the three adults shared a smile. She's going to run this place someday, Jeremiah predicted. Without a doubt, Avery agreed. Maxwell checked his watch. The board of the foundation is arriving in an hour. Shall we prepare? The Redwood Foundation had been established to fund both the hospital and medical scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Avery, having resumed her medical studies, was its director, while Jeremiah and Maxwell served on the board alongside medical professionals from across the country. As they gathered their papers and headed inside, Maxwell paused by a small table where a restored gold medallion rested in a velvet-lined box. The Redwood family crest that had once hung around Jeremiah's neck, now polished and repaired. I had something made for Daisy, he mentioned, removing a small package from his pocket. For her birthday next week. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet, similar to the one he'd given her before her surgery, but now featuring a small medallion identical to the Redwood crest. It's beautiful, Avery said, touching it gently. Redwoods endure, Maxwell said simply. Broken, bent, damaged, but still standing, still growing. That's who we are now. As they moved through the mansion that was gradually transforming from a monument to wealth into a place of healing, the metaphor seemed particularly apt. The Redwood family, like the ancient trees they were named for, had weathered a terrible storm, scarred but ultimately stronger, their roots intertwined in ways that could never be severed.